Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled Forklift Mayhem. So I worked at a very large hardware store both in the lumber yard and as a delivery driver. The lumber yard always closed at 5 p.m. and I was always off at 4:30. More often than not I would stay 5 to 15 minutes late every shift to help customers in the yard, while my supervisor would finish other work. Now, my supervisor, let's call him Joe, would always get angry that I wouldn't work overtime because I had to go pick up my girlfriend after work. She and I only had one car at the time, so I really couldn't stick around longer than 10 or 15 minutes. Keep in mind I wouldn't get paid for sticking around the extra 5 to 15 minutes every day. So I gave a lot of free time for over 2 years. One day Joe blew up on me more than usual for not agreeing to work overtime on my final day before my weekend. I told him I work 5 to 15 minutes extra almost daily to help him with customers in the yard. He said, "Big ducking deal. Oh, an extra 5 or 10 minutes, how generous." So after that I clocked out and went home. The next shift I was in the middle of bringing down a lift of lumber from a rack for a customer. The bottom rack had just been emptied by another customer. So I dropped the lift down and started to take off the lumber tarp when my 4:30 p.m. alarm went off on my phone. I was officially done my shift. Since Joe said it wasn't a big help to stick around 5 or 10 minutes extra, I chose to leave. I left the lift of lumber half wrapped with the forklift blocking the lane for traffic to get through. The customer didn't say a word as I walked away. Joe drove up to me on the other forklift and said, "What the hell are you doing? I need you to finish up, we have a full yard." I looked at him, smiled and said, "What difference does 5 or 10 extra minutes make? No big deal, right?" Then I walked away and clocked out for the day. Felt really good and it was worth the ride up the following day. Edit: this occurred when I was 19 to 21 and I'm now mid-20s. I'm happily employed and treated well today. Thank you everyone. Next one is titled, You Want to Change My Hours Without Telling Me. Okay, I'm gonna make you quit your job. So I worked in a fairly popular shipping company. It was Amazon. Amazon has this thing called flex hours. So if they wanted they could add or take away an hour from your shift. That would be fine, but according to the Amazon rules, if the adjusted hours are not shown by the middle of our shifts, then we could follow our normal scheduled hours. Here is the thing, my warehouse managers were lazy suckers and hated doing anything except standing and looking pretty. Also, when they changed the flex hours, they wouldn't change it on your official schedule until it was too late to make a report about it. So I had a bit of personal time, which is the time we can use to get out of shifts early or come in late, so I decided that I was going to leave work a little bit early because I was going to go into the city with my friend Peter. Now I put in the request on the app that Amazon gives all its workers for my hour of leaving early. Now at this point, it was the middle of my shift, so no flex was given to us according to our knowledge. I leave early and then a few hours later I get a text stating that I left too early. This was false because my end of shift would have been at 5:45 and I left exactly at 4:45. So I went in the next day and boom, walk into HR. I say to the lady, "Hi, you guys said I left early, but I didn't. I have the photo evidence right here of me putting in the request with no flex on my schedule." Then I got a, "No sir, the correct hours were posted." So I show her a screenshot on my original schedule and a picture of the board where the adjusted hours are put onto, which was not showing adjusted hours at all. She said, "Oh okay, well I am sure the managers made an announcement." What did I do? Well, clearly I said nope. Her final chance to get me was a really petty thing to say, but she said, "You have no proof, these are the rules," and oh boy I did. Out of my bag I pulled out the entire Amazon Warehouse Associate Rule Guide that they give every single worker a digital copy of. I turned to the part about flex hours and showed her that she was in the wrong as HR. She finally broke and gave me all my hours back without any write-ups, plus all the paid time off time I had used that past week. This happened like 20 more times after the fact. I was able to get away with it every time because I actually spoke up and had the proof to back me up. Mrs. HR ended up being so stressed out by it that she trained 4 new people and officially left the company in August. Because of my malicious compliance with the Amazon rules, they even changed the official policy on flex time because my reporting of it caused almost everyone to follow suit and also report their issues with it. Next one is titled, Turning a Crisis into a Catastrophe. I took a job working in a specific industry. It wasn't rocket science, anyone with decent research, interview skills could do it, but the industry demanded a certain format for the information and for the end product to be marketable each project had to be completed in a certain time frame and meet certain benchmarks. As such, there was a bit of training involved in getting new staff familiar with the process, hitting targets and producing to a reasonable quality. The company I worked for took the policy of paying peanuts to the extreme. The consequence was that they ended up training a lot of people who moved on to better paying positions at competitors. We were actively headhunted once we'd been working there for 18+ months. Instead of doing the sensible thing, and offering pay increases, retention bonuses, the MD liked to lecture us about loyalty and not biting the hand that feeds you whilst telling us we were losers who were lucky to be employed. Shockingly, this did not have the desired effect of increasing morale or loyalty. All the best staff were siphoned off by competitors, leaving the dead wood and the hopelessly naive, that would be me, who thought that their hard work and perseverance would eventually be rewarded with pay increases and promotion. Like I said, hopelessly naive. A crisis arose when a larger than usual number of staff left for greener pastures in a shorter than usual period. There was not enough experienced staff to take over all the projects. Some of the newbies were thrown in way over their heads and a decent portion of them couldn't cope and walked out. We were meant to have about 100 people working in this role, and only had about 75. In his wisdom, the MD decided that the best way to deal with this was to cancel all leave. I had leave coming up. My honeymoon to be exact. I had gotten married a month previously, but we planned a dream holiday for a few weeks later. And it was now cancelled. Even 20-year-old me, who was, as previously noted, hopelessly naive, had a breaking point. I approached the MD, politely asked if I could take my previously approved leave. No. Either do your job or hand in your resignation, he said, confident that the little mouse would scurry back to her desk and quietly continue doing the work of 2 people. I did go back to my desk. But I returned in 10 minutes and handed in my resignation, stating my last day would be in 2 days, giving myself the luxury of time to get sorted before leaving. Apparently the aftermath was quite something. I was the start of a disastrous second cascade of disappearing staff. The dam was leaking before I left, but it collapsed after. He essentially had to start over, and it took years for him to recover from losing 80% of his key workers. He certainly lost his dominant position in the market. But I didn't inquire deeply. I secured a job with one of the competitors who had been making offers and never went back. I still work in that field, and every now and then I run into one of my old colleagues and we reminisce about the bad old days and laugh about what a tosser he was. Next one is titled, Tell Me I Am Taking Too Many Breaks, and my breaks need to be 2 15-minute breaks, and 1 hour-long break. Okay, gotcha boss. I was working as a temp for a company, and the women in my area were horrible. Catty as all hell. They started picking on everything I did, because I was making them look bad with the sheer amount of work I was doing, so they figured they would find reasons to get me in trouble. I smoked, so I would run out at convenient times during my work day for a quick puff, and I would only take 1/2 hour for lunch just to eat. They told my immediate supervisor that I was taking too many breaks. I was reminded by my supervisor of labor laws, and how I get 2 15-minute breaks, and an hour for lunch. I always keep track of all breaks in a notepad, time out, time in, and I never came close to 1.5 hours of breaks before, including bathroom breaks. I told my immediate supervisor this, and he said, you need to follow the rules, but be sure to make use of your notepad. Here comes the good part. This job involved all customs paperwork for aircraft parts for military planes that were being fixed. There was never a good 15 minutes or an hour to leave the desk. There was always a call, always an emergency, always paperwork that needed to be done. But I started going for my breaks like a good girl. 2 breaks exactly 15 minutes in length, and 1 60-minute lunch. Lo and behold, the other two started complaining because they couldn't handle the pace of their job plus mine. I did it when they would go on breaks just fine. I ended up leaving that job right before they lost their jobs. Next one is titled, HR Maliciously Reject Leave Request. Ensuing malicious compliance results in a ridiculous amount of leave taken, all within the rules. I work in a UK company that has a very good leave policy. I get 27 days annual leave, and I can also build up flexi time and take up to 2 flexi days off per month. In addition, due to a screw-up in HR, I am allowed to float all my public holidays. I was moved to a joint venture company for tax and legal purposes, and when they took me back into the parent company, they just adopted my contract from that company instead of getting me to sign a new one. One day I put in a leave request for 3 leave days and 2 flexi days. HR person denied it, as she said it was against the rules to mix flexi and normal leave days. The rules had changed some time ago to allow mixing, but HR person told me that it was against the rules. I took it higher and her decision was overturned, but she did not like it one little bit. Thereafter, whenever I submitted a request with mixed leave, she rejected it out of spite, claiming that it was not in the spirit of the rules. It is an interesting view into her mindset that she refused instead of asking how she could do it too. She was all about stopping me, so the fight began. Easter was coming up and I was due to take 2 weeks off. The middle Friday of my holiday was also the end of my leave month, and the Monday started a new month. So I put in for 2 public holidays carried over from Christmas, 2 flexi days and a Good Friday public holiday. And since the second week was a new leave month, I used another 2 days of flexi, plus the public holiday Easter Monday and 1 day of public holiday from the start of the year. So my 14 days holiday in the sun cost me a single Friday, which is 5 hours of leave time. She went ballistic but could do nothing despite trying to find any way to stop the request. As a direct result of her trying to stop me, I now make a point of building up and using as much flexi leave as I can just to see her pretending to smile as I hand in my request to her directly every single time. She grits her teeth so much I expect her to break a jaw. In 2019 I peaked and managed almost 60 days of leave, all thanks to her. Maybe I should thank her. Next one is titled, I should go to the principal if I don't like your late policy. Sure thing. All of the high school stories reminded me of one from back in the day. Over a decade ago I was in my half-credit required civics course in high school. It went over the essentials of how my country's and province's government works, what the various ministers' roles were, and other things like that. The teacher of this class was a woman who started the semester very aggressive with all of the students. Our first class was entirely her lecturing about the rules of her classroom. Namely, 1. Once the bell rings, the class starts and she locks the door. If you're late, you're not going to her class that day. 2. If you miss class without a sick note, she won't help you catch up on what you missed, including not giving handouts, or what the text readings were for the day. 3. She is an adult and we were teenagers, so we will respect her. 4. If we don't like it, we can go to the principal. She enforced all of these to the letter. Even more so if you had the misfortune of having had a sibling go through her class before that she did not like, just as I did. But I made sure to try and stay on her, if not good, at least non-antagonistic side. I lived in the country outside of the town where the school was, and my bus was notorious for only letting you get to your morning class on time by the skin of your teeth, and you could forget being on time if you had to go to your locker for books or drop off winter gear. So I drove to school every morning in a truck that was older than I, ran on hope and desperation, and had a hole where the radio used to be a decade ago that would occasionally spark at you if the road was too bumpy. This way I was always not only on time for her class, but early. I sat in the front, paid as much attention as I could, wrote notes, answered questions, and did great on her quizzes. I was determined in my teenage mind that I could change her opinion on me, and show that I wasn't my brother. But none of that mattered. I was knocked points off of quizzes because of my poor handwriting. I would later as an adult find out I have dysgraphia. I would only be selected to answer a question if mine was the only hand, and even then if I was wrong I'd be berated instead of corrected. She did not like me, and over the course of that half semester made it very clear that she would only ever view me with malevolence, and if I was lucky I'd get to the point of ambivalence. Come the end of the course, we just had to write an in-class written exam. Lo and behold, this was also the day that my hope and desperation gave out. My truck broke down, and the bus passed while I was trying the normal fixes to get it running again. I was lucky that my brother had some of his business to take care of in town that morning, so he gave me a ride in. But I still got to class a couple minutes after the bell. So I knocked. In my pure and innocent mind I thought that my perfect attendance and obvious willingness to learn the material of the class would be worth something. To my surprise it was. She actually opened the door, a first of the semester, and told me that I was late and obviously didn't have any respect for her or the rest of my class to interrupt their exam like this. I didn't like that, so I followed her word and went to the principal about it. Turns out, most people did not follow that last rule of hers, and instead would take the period as free, and when they got called into the office the next day for skipping class, would be given a free pass because of the secretary's general opinion of this particular teacher. But I was one of the first to actually come and complain about being locked out. Even better, I was coming to complain that she was refusing to allow me to write my final exam for the class. The office secretary told me to just wait there for a minute, and went to talk to the principal. She came back with a look of schadenfreudian joy on her face, and with the largest Cheshire smile picked up her phone and dialed to the PA in the teacher's room. Over the phone she said, quite loud enough for the whole office to hear, "Ms. Redacted, Mr. Principal name is asking that you not force a student to fail, and allow Mr. my last name in to write his exam." With that I marched back to class, at this point only having about half the period left to write the exam. She let me into the room with a glare that would make a more godly man think he was seeing the face of demonic possession. Not only had I subverted her rules, but I had also gotten her called out about it on loudspeaker in front of the whole class and made her lose face in front of those teenagers she demanded so much respect from. I wrote and finished the exam, handing it in with little time to spare at the end of the period, and ended up passing the class with what I think was a much poorer grade than I deserved. I followed up with my cousin who took her class a few years later, and apparently her policy of locking students out of class for being late was gone by the time she took the class. I don't know if it was because of me, but I like to think it was. Next one is titled, "Teacher Wants Me Shaved, No Problem, I Have an Excuse to Leave Every Lesson." So this happened back when I was about 15 to 16 years old. At that time most of my classmates lacked facial hair, or they could just shave every 2 weeks and be done with it. A few of us had the capability of growing a beard. The school had a policy of a clean shave, and if a student was sent to the office he would be given a razor to shave in the toilets. Most teachers though would ignore the rule and sometimes give a notice if someone had too much hair, so I used to shaved about once a week, even more. Then comes in the chemistry teacher. He was obsessed with implementing this rule, so every time we went to his class even a bit unshaved, I am talking 1 day's worth of hair, he would send us to shave in the toilet, so eventually everybody gave in and shaved regularly. Here comes the MC. Since I hated his class anyway I never shaved, so he would always send me for a shave. This caused me to probably miss about 20 minutes of every 80 minutes class we ever had since I took my time, and probably stopped by the canteen every time. At some point he realized he was not punishing me, but he was too stubborn to amend his rules, so I just kept on missing his lesson, which I loved. Next one is titled, "Blue Collar Guys Must Be Lazy, and Must Start Following Clock in Out Procedures Exactly?" Okay. Story told to me by a friend that worked for a local city. The local city had some Karens, Darrens, in the offices and city council that decided that their water and town works guys were probably costing a lot of money on driving around, and on unnecessary breaks and goofing off. You know, even though the water guys had state certifications that required college-level math, they had to be lazy and dumb, because they are blue-collar. The city installed a time clock into their work phones, which also included a GPS, and instead of clocking in and out, and manually writing down breaks, it recorded everything to the minute. In the very first month, it cost thousands of dollars in OT, because the guys had always got there early to warm the trucks, get the tools they needed, tank up with gas, etc. They would just clock in at normal time. And oftentimes, they would eat on the go. They would also take an extra 15 to 20 minutes to finish a project, if necessary, before coming back. So, they were told to clock in at the exact time, to take all assigned breaks, and to be back before the shift ended. Okay, fine. They did exactly as asked. It took an extra 30 to 45 minutes to get started, then they lost another hour or two on the breaks they normally didn't take, and finally, if a road project could be finished and done by 17:30, they couldn't work over to and finish the job, because that would mean OT. So, at 1600 start packing tools and just leave a lane out of commission, so that they could be back at 1700. Then the next day, they lost the first 30 minutes of prep, 15 of driving, and 20 minutes undoing the lane blockage, to finish an hour and a half of work. Complaints poured in. Efficiency ground to a halt. After a severe chewing out by the finance department over the OT, and the residents over projects being left half done, something had to be done. The office was faced with three choices: either accept the insane overtime and watch the budget be devoured, continue to have more and more POED residents, voting taxpayers, or admit that they were wrong and go back to the original way, with some raises and changes to how breaks were taken. Last one is titled, My Mother's Compliance. My mother was the coolest. She also could be the most evil woman imaginable. I adored her, and still miss her terribly. So, my mum had a boyfriend once. My dad died suddenly when I was 9. He was a lieutenant with our city's police department. He was also shady as duck. One Christmas he gave me and my sisters brown velvet blazers. They were hideous. They were also evidence from a shoplifting ring. Nice guy, huh? So the breakup. He made it nasty, because he cheated. He refused to give back some things from my dad, as they had lived together. So I told my mum to take him to small claims court. Long story short, he was ordered to return all her possessions, and she was ordered to pay $175. Here's where it gets good. She gets all her possessions back, and she went to the attorney's office to pay the $175. In pennies. Not rolled, just in a couple of containers. At 4:45 on a Friday. At first they refused. Mum told them it was illegal to refuse legal tender. Cops were called, and they agreed with us. It's money, never stipulated as to what method of payment, only the amount. So we sat. I drove her over. I wouldn't have missed this for the world, and watched as some assistant counted and rolled all the money, with an attorney observing. I had counted it 3 times. It was exactly $175. I loved my mum's evil grin as she said, I'll be needing a receipt, and one of your cards from both of you stapled to it, please. It was priceless. My mum was my hero. But don't make me get evil. I learned from the best. Thanks for listening.